Good afternoon.
Hi, I'm Barbara Stokol, and today is May the 13th of 2015.
Very good. Tell me, Barbara, a little bit about where your family came from, if you can, even prior to being in South Africa, and what can you share about your early lives when you got there?
My families came from Lithuania, and both my parents were born in South Africa. So I was a second generation South African. And what did you want to know about my early life in South Africa?
Anything you'd like to share, anything that was memorable when you were young there, growing up there?
I think the Jewish community, the small towns had large Jewish communities because the Jews would become smokers and they would go out into the country and then they would set up shop eventually, and that's how those small towns were settled by the Jews. So growing up, we had a large Jewish community. We had Habonim groups. We had youth groups. We very active. Went from a very small shul. I'm from Klerksdorp.
Where is that exactly?
100 miles from Johannesburg, in the goldfields. And I remember growing up with a very old shul, and we burst at the seams. So they built a beautiful new big shul where we got married, and now there is no shul. It's gone back to, I think there are 25 people left in Klerksdorp. They've got a little house that they've bought, and the whole service is there, but it's getting harder and harder to get them in it.
How and why did you make the decision to leave South Africa? And by the way, when did you meet your husband?
Arnie and I met in pharmacy school in 1971. I continued and graduated. He decided to change professions and became an optometrist. So I was raised with a very forward-thinking father, great visionary. And he had, at that point, 4 daughters. Subsequently, we had a younger brother born, but he was way later. And raised all us girls to get educated with something we could move with and get out. Because he gave South Africa 20 years, 60 years ago. And so it was not a question that I was leaving the country. I met Arnie, who didn't like the political situation, the way the blacks were treated, and he was leaving the country. So it was a match. We were leaving. And we didn't want to start a family and him start a practice in a country that had no future for our children.
Once you had made the decision to leave, and obviously it was mutual, what were you then thinking and feeling? And what steps did you take to leave?
It was a great, exciting adventure. We didn't give 2 minutes of thought about our family at all. Our honeymoon, we went to England. We thought we were going to actually settle there, stay there. They didn't want us. We didn't want them eventually, and we left England. And that's when he decided to apply to America to come and do the doctorate here. So it was Israel could have been an option, but we couldn't make ends meet as an optometrist and a pharmacist in Israel.
What was your family's reaction to your decision to leave?
My family's reaction was great delight because of how I was raised. Arnie's father thought he was crazy and that he would grow up one day and we'd be back.
Did anybody near you, close to you, also have the same things going on where they were deciding to leave around the same time you were, or any family members or friends?
Nobody.
Nobody else?
This was in 1978 is when we arrived in this country. Very few people were leaving South Africa at that time. We got to Dallas and there were, a handful, but nothing, not in the droves and the numbers that left in the 80s and later on.
So you were the first wave of immigration.
We
first
were.
Your age to come here.
Yeah.
Okay. you said you spent some time in England. How did you settle on Dallas, Texas, as opposed to any other cities here in the U.S.?
Arnie did his doctorate at the University of Houston. He was accepted at the school there. The boards were written, he finished in the December, the boards were written in the January, and he got a job offer from a wonderful man called Maury Ray, who owns Optical Clinic here in Dallas, who offered him immigration and work, would do his green card and a job. And we liked Texas, we just didn't like Houston. And so we were looking for somewhere to go with a big Jewish community, because that was important to us. And this offer came out of, just connections, and he took it.
And what were you doing at the time? Did you find a job here as well?
And by the way, we had a 6-week-old baby, so he had to work. I didn't know this, but I came to this country pregnant in '78, and in those days, South Africa was not allowing more than a certain dollar amount out of the country.
Mm-hmm.
And so as a student and the spouse of a student, we could get 800 Rand a month, which translated into $1,200, which we were living off at that point. And I knew having a baby was going to complicate matters. We didn't have insurance. It was going to cost money for the OB-GYN. It was going to definitely be a cost. And so the only way that we could...
Sorry.
That's okay.
Sorry. Okay. Yes, go ahead. Sorry.
Where were we?
With your baby, having a baby and the insurance and everything.
Right. Oh, yes.
So-
And so I decided I had to work. And you won't know this because you're not an immigrant, but when you're on a visa as a spouse of a student, you do not get a work visa. I mean, it's just not even, doesn't happen. And so I said, you know what, I've got to give it a shot. We went down to immigration and had to pull a number, and my number was 13, and it's my lucky number. And I said to Arnie, I'm getting a work permit. And we told the gentleman who interviewed us what was going on, and he gave me a part-time work permit. So I then said, well, what am I going to do? Because I'm a pharmacist, but I can't practice as a pharmacist because I'm not qualified here in this country. And I went for there was clerking position. I said, I can clerk, I can file, I can do that. So I go for the interview, and they give me an IQ test. And she says to me, oh, Barbara, you can't do this. She said, you're going to be bored out of your mind within the first week. But we have this insurance agent who's looking for a secretary. And you'd be perfect. I said, and when I did my typing test, I was so ignorant. I went back to correct my typing, which apparently you're not supposed to do. And I said to her, you do understand that I'm a pharmacist, and you do understand that I've never been a secretary. And she said, he said, that's fine. And he took me on. And I worked for him, full-time actually, until Trevor was born. And in fact, when I left, he asked me if I knew any other South African pharmacists that were looking for jobs.
You were so good at it. Oh. Tell me, what were your first impressions of Dallas, if you can remember, memorable or otherwise? And also, what type of adjustment issues did you have being in Dallas, which is a particular place here in the U.S.?
My memories that were how warm and welcoming the Jewish community was. Particularly the South Africans, the Israelsons, the Beverly Lewin, that's all you have to say. And then that was it. Before I knew it, Trevor was, preschool at Solomon Schechter. And I mean, that's just the way it was. And so it was only good stuff.
What about Dallas, the city at large, besides the Jewish community? How did you feel about the city, the looks of it, the way it was? So different, I'm sure, from what you were used to back home.
Well, having gone to Houston in the interim gave us some idea. We didn't come straight from South Africa to Dallas, so it was another big city. And as we all know, we live our lives in our little areas. You have your bank and your dry cleaner and whatever. So, and when you have a young baby, you're so involved with just trying to raise this child that you're not very aware or take part much in what's going on in the city.
So did you join anything, or were you particularly active in anything in your early days here, you and your husband?
Arnie was working, and then was going to start a practice. So there was a lot of involvement with starting the practice, getting a loan, finding whatever. And we joined the JCC when we got here in the early times. I was playing racquetball here and doing exercise classes and taking advantage of their daycare facilities. Trevor was going to Solomon Schechter. We did not join a show until much later.
And what did you join when you decided to?
Sherith Israel is really where we landed up, and that was for starting Hebrew school and bar bat mitzvahs when the kids really didn't need Hebrew schools because they were at Solomon Schechter.
Right.
But we needed a place to have a bar bat mitzvah, so that's what motivated us.
So you said you found the Jewish community very welcoming. What about, do you remember any impressions at all about the city, the community at large, how they welcomed you as far as being an immigrant from another country? Do you have any impressions of that?
Well, I think they're always intrigued with the South Africans, especially in those early days. The accent and everything that goes with that. We are very accepting, always interested. What made you come here? That kind of stuff. So that always is like a segue to a discussion, a relationship. Yeah.
Through the years, have you joined anything civic-minded or community-minded besides the Jewish community? Have you gotten involved in anything?
Arnie's involved in Rotary. Civic-minded. Not really. I haven't done anything really civic-minded.
Okay. What do you feel, or can you remember any of your South African Jewish cultural things that you carried over and brought here? Things that you still retain and still did with your family living here? Or particularly South African?
Well, first of all, Yontif was Yontif. And because we celebrate all our Jewish holidays with South Africans, Yontif has continued to be Yontif. We make kichel and herring, and we make, I don't know what else we do. Typical South African Yontif meals, celebrations, whatever it is, Pesach recipes, that kind of stuff.
Along that line, is there anything you can think of that you no longer follow and did so, with that clear thought in mind, bringing over here, that you did not wish to continue, Jewish or otherwise, that you can think of? No?
Not really.
Okay. Do you think your children will your family at large, do they think they will continue some of the customs that you consider South African customs, or has that kind of gone by the wayside?
Well, I hope so, because we do continue that, and we only have one son-in-law, and we are definitely converting him to how we do it and the way we do it and the foods we do. And but I don't know, at this point, Jody doesn't do much cooking since she's still at school, and shows not much interest in continuing those things. And a lot of what we do and what we bring tradition-wise has got to do with food. What else is it, if you think about it? But Josh is always willing to try new things and experiment and be a part of it. So I don't know.
I know Zionism was very much a part of you growing up. How have you carried that over here? What are your feelings about Israel here?
I don't think Zionism was really even though we belong to Jewish youth groups, their intention might have been Aliyah. But when you're 10 and 11 and 12, all you're interested in is being with your friends on a Sunday morning and participating.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm not sure if Aliyah was ever on our minds necessarily. And as I told you earlier, we had an opportunity, at least for 6 months even, to go and work in Israel while we were waiting to come to the United States. And it just wasn't economically feasible.
Let me put it a different way then. Set aside Aliyah, how do you feel today living in the States about Israel, or any connections with it?
Very supportive. We know a lot of people that live in Israel, South Africans. We buy bonds, whatever's any way we can to support it.
Have you had a chance to go back home to South Africa since you've been here? And if so, how often or when have you gone?
I went home back to South Africa often when the kids were younger. My dad wouldn't travel, so the only way that he could get to see them was by me taking them. As the years went on and my dad passed away, it wasn't as frequent. My mom would usually would bring her to visit us here. But we go back all the time for bar and bat mitzvahs, for weddings now, and constant back and forth.
So I had asked you earlier when you were younger if anybody came over around the same time you were coming. Has that changed? People that you knew directly that you were close with, either relatives or friends, have they now come here since you've been here so long, or no, have they still remained there?
No, a number of our friends have come over. Not my family. I have 2 siblings that moved to Australia, but did not come to the United States.
That seems to be the other choice, the good choice.
Yeah, yeah.
What, if anything, do you miss about your life in South Africa?
Not a thing.
Really?
Not a thing. Beautiful country. We go back, wonderful to visit. Wine farms, Cape Town, safaris. Fabulous place to visit. Not a thing.
But you don't miss it. Okay. Talk about your citizenship a little bit. Do you consider yourself an American? And if so, how did you become a U.S. citizen?
Absolutely consider ourselves a mere American. Voted the first time Reagan went into office. What year was that? Don't remember. In the 80s.
82, I can't remember.
Yeah.
To go look it up.
Once, as I said, Arnie got this green card. Maury Ray would do the green card for him. He did. He got his green card. We got our green cards, waited for 5 years, which you have to wait, got our citizenship and voted.
Very good.
And the kids were both born here, so they were automatically U.S. citizens.
Describe to us, how has your family grown since you've been here?
Grown. Arnie's brother came over with his family to this area because we were here. Jody's married a Dallas boy, and at this point is in Dallas, so we've got a whole new family on the other side.
Very good. Any grandkids yet?
Yes.
Yes.
Maya. She's 8 months old.
Oh,
Sweet.
wonderful. And what does Jody do, and her husband?
Jody has just graduated as a doctor this week.
Oh, Mazel tov.
In fact, graduation is next week.
Yeah.
And has matched here in Dallas, Texas for her pathology residency. So they're going to be here for the next 4 years, which is wonderful.
Fabulous.
Josh is by profession a lawyer and working in his family's business. Sol Levine started a schmutter business, and the family has continued it for 100 years and is working there right now.
Fabulous. Okay. So, in general, I think we already know the answer to this, but just in your own words, why you're glad that you came here and that you ended up here.
Well, we've achieved what we wanted to, and that was to give our kids a future in a country that was politically stable. And in fact, Jody has turned around and thanked us for it, because her cousins who are still in South Africa, who are the same age group, are grappling with the same issues. Do we stay? Do we go? Do we leave this? Do we go on an adventure. And she said that decision was made for her in our moving.
Has she been in touch with her cousins and trying to convince them which way?
You know, they're adults. They're not going to convince anybody of anything.
But have they been here to visit?
Oh yeah,
Yes.
oh yeah. In fact, they had Arnie's sister won the green card lottery. Do you know what a green card lottery is?
I can guess, but tell me, what is it?
Well, you won't know this, but your immigration department, I don't know who actually does it, but puts out lotteries around the world.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting is that if you don't have a high school degree, have a high school graduation diploma, whatever they call it, they tell you do not even bother to continue this process. So what they're trying to do is encourage educated people. And Arnie's sister, brother-in-law, and all three kids got this 15 years ago, and still just recently turned it in.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they gave it up.
Mm.
So you can't have anything more than that land in your lap if you don't want it. You know,
Mm-hmm.
they did it for their kids, same as what we did. One of the children has landed up in England, and the other two don't want to leave.
Really?
But the interesting thing there is that they've applied for Lithuanian passports, and which gives them EU
Mm-hmm.
ability to be anywhere in Europe. So that's their way of ensuring for their kids that if they want to, they can leave the country later on.
It's a good way to do it.
Yeah.
So in conclusion, tell us, Barbara, in your own words, whatever you'd like, anything else that you would like to add at all, anything at all to this interview that you want to throw out there?
You know, I think that the first wave of South African immigrants was not a true sampling of immigrants in general, you know, all the South Africans, but it was a group that was clearly motivated, like most immigrants are that come to this country, to get away from either political unrest and uncertain futures. And I think they've done an amazing job. I think the South Africans are well thought of and successful in their own way and have added a lot to the community.
I agree with that, and I thank you so much for your time. Thanks for doing this.
My pleasure.